evening, everyone, and welcome to the Committee of the Whole meeting. This is Butte-Silver Council Commissioners Committee of the Whole, Wednesday, October 26, 2022. Could I have roll call, please, Russ?
One presiding, 10 present, 1 absent.
Okay, thank you. Would you join us with Commissioner Sorge in the prayer and the pledge?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Fellow Commissioners, Almighty God, we implore you, look upon us and guide us this night as we make decisions which will greatly affect our community of Butte-Silver. Direct our thoughts, words, and deeds so that we please you and best serve our fellow citizens. Amen.
Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, John. Okay, moving along in our agenda, this is a point in our evening that we ask for any public comment on any item that is on tonight's agenda. If there's any public comment, please come forward to the microphone. Give us your name and address for the record. I thought JP was going to give a comment.
Hi, my name is John McKee, 2714 Edwards here in Butte. I'd just like to read some public comment in following up on the general comments that were in Judiciary Committee earlier about Council Bill 2022-11. Thank you for giving us all the opportunity over the last 2 weeks to sit down with the Butte-Silver executive team and further discuss both the decisions that went into and the impacts of the proposed wastewater treatment systems ordinance 2022-11. While the EPA coordinator was unable to attend our meeting last Tuesday, he was able to give verbal responses to WET and the BSBM executive team prior to the meeting, which were summarized and presented by WET, and I've attached that to the letter here that I'll leave with you guys. In short, we were grateful that EPA acknowledged via WET's verbal commentary that our proposed approaches promulgated by the EPA would have been appropriate for calculating case-by-case discharge rates for industrial users. However, also in our discussions, we were informed by WET that Butte-Silver was already too close to the EPA deadline when this ordinance is required to take effect to allow for any edits to be made. This means that if Headframe or other IUs elected to continue to oppose this ordinance as written and ask for a more equitable approach to fees, those IUs may have put Butte-Silver in violation of their deadline. As a result, we are respectfully withdrawing our objections because we have no wish to see harm come to Butte-Silver via the EPA. We do wish to repeat that if the public participation we have been asking for since February of 2022 had not been rebuffed on this issue, we could have all been working together on this collaboratively and transparently, as EPA's verbal response also said should have been encouraged. We further note that if the regulation hadn't been released for public comment with fewer than 2 months until it was due, the entire process could have been avoided. We also want to note that this process, specifically prior to the regulation modification, could have been brought to the Public Works Subcommittee of the Council of Commissioners at any time during its conception, revision, and drafting process. In that forum, the council could have learned about and heard from more constituents and had a more cohesive and more thought out draft regulation prior to being brought before the Judiciary Committee and the Council of the Whole. As a result of the rushed push to the deadline and the process of public participation being granted at such a late point in the process, it literally became impossible to revise the draft ordinance before potentially putting the county in violation of their deadline from the EPA. This cannot reasonably be considered public participation. Being left with no other options to modify the ordinance with EPA allowed methods, we fully support the ordinance as drafted and ask the council to pass it as written. On the whole, we remain proud to be a small business in the Butte-Silver community, and we're constantly grateful to have the leadership of the council and the executive team of Butte-Silver doing the amazing work they do every day. So thank you very much, and pass this thing. Let's get it done. And then just as an aside, Jim Ford's going to show you about the parrot tonight. I've been sitting in that committee for, 12 years at your guys' blessing. You guys and your predecessors appointed me to do that years and years and years ago. and it's really bomber, and I'm really excited to see what you guys see what we've been doing down at the Parrot. So thank you.
Thank you, John. Any other comments on any item on tonight's agenda? Okay, seeing none. Moving along, report of the chair. I don't really have anything to report. I'm looking forward to the Parrot Tailings report from Jim. So we'll move on to section 1, bid openings, public hearings, and presentations. Before that, I forgot to mention that, in case nobody noticed, Commissioner Fisher is absent and he is excused. Just want to make record of that, please. So presentations. Item 1, communication number 2022-510. Jim Ford, Parrot Tailings Waste Removal Project Manager, requesting council commissioners for time on tonight's agenda of the committee of the whole for a presentation on the Parrot Tailings Waste Removal Project. Jim, the floor is yours. Welcome.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Again, my name is Jim Ford. I work for the Natural Resource Damage Program in the state of Montana. We're associated with the Department of Justice, and we've been managing the cleanup of the Parrot tailings. So tonight, I thought I'd give you guys an update on where the project's at, maybe do a quick review of the needs and rationale for the project for those of you that haven't really been tracking it. And then I was hoping just that we would have, if it's possible, to have any questions, because I can't possibly cover everything that you may want to know, but I'd like to hear what you have questions on or concerns or other thoughts. So today I'm really going to focus on, we had a change in our backfill source, which is a fairly major change to the project. I'm going to talk a little bit about our evapotranspiration cover. You know, there's a lot of knowledge on the digging up of the waste, but we're covering another 18 acres of waste where it's not saturated by groundwater to protect it. I'm going to give you an update on the schedule and then talk a little bit about the budget. So what we have here is a figure of the second phase of the waste excavation. You can see to the bottom left of the screen is the top of the Civic Center. The area that this encompasses, you know, historically had the shop complex on it. The shop complex was relocated and constructed at its new location. Butte-Silver did a really good job of keeping that project on schedule and on budget. So that was about a $14.5 million component of the project. So we did the excavation a couple of years back on the phase 1, or what's called up there phase 2A, as the engineers got a little carried away. That was completed. Then we had to wait. We had a period of time where the shops had to be rebuilt and then moved over. Then we got in there last year and demoed the shops and started the waste excavation. That green little polygon there is what we just started the other day. That's the last bit of waste removal we have left. That's about 30,000 cubic yards on that location. So this is a schematic of the project as a whole. So again, the red hashed areas are where we're removing waste. The green hashed areas are where we're constructing this cap that eliminates infiltration. And then that blue line is our haul route up onto Montana Resources. So this is sort of a critical component of this project. One, to be able to do it safely, most importantly, but to also be able to do it economically. Being able to use large equipment, large haul equipment, not running on public roads, so the safety issue really made the project safe and cost efficient. So we utilize 70-ton trucks, some articulated 40-ton trucks. Your typical over-the-road truck is 14 tons for comparison. So we haul it up onto Montana Resources. We have 2 disposal locations, and I'm not going to get into the whole history why we have 2. The bottom line is all the waste ends up at the placement location, and why that's a safe and secure location is that any leakage, any runoff from those wastes, all that water reports to the pit. Now down on the Parrot site itself, all infiltration, leakage from this waste, all stuff flows into groundwater and down towards the creek. So we have a hydraulic divide there where water north of that divide reports to the pit and water south of that divide reports to the creeks. So the whole reason for addressing these wastes was to protect the creeks with the ancillary benefit of cleaning up the aquifer sooner rather than later. Oh, one other issue on this thing. You can see a little red dot there at Montana Resources process pond and a black line. That's where we pump the contaminated groundwater that's saturating the bottom of these wastes. We dewater those wastes so we can dig them out, and we pump all that highly contaminated water. So it's very low pH, it's acidic. It's about 3.7 pH, so like a vinegar, and it has really high concentrations of contaminants. Up near 150,000 to 200,000 milligrams per liter. So many orders of magnitude above like what's toxic in streams and such. Okay, so this backfill change. What we found in this second phase of excavation is that we ended up with more waste than we had anticipated. And the waste that we had found that wasn't anticipated was what we were hoping was going to be clean fill, to be able to use to fill the site. Most of our backfill was coming from a source in the valley. We needed about 130,000 cubic yards additional backfill, but we didn't want to drive all those trucks through public roads. There's just too much risk. There's damage to the roads. So luckily, with our partnership with Montana Resources, we identified a source over called the lunchroom. We call it the lunchroom backfill borrow source. It's historically known as the lunchroom dump. But that was clean overburden from an area, I think, adjacent to the pit when they first started opening the pit in the 50s. So what we did to make sure that this met all our criteria, we did some initial trenching and sampling. So all those little boxes are analytical numbers. So we have criteria for what we can use for backfill to make sure it's not contaminated. We did some additional sampling, and then we did a whole lot more sampling. And obviously, I'm not going through any numbers here, but all those polygons with green squiggly lines are stuff that met our numeric criteria. And we do this in lifts. So every time we dig up a lift, we test the next lift. So we can ensure that anything that we're bringing on site is clean. So like I said, this saved more than 136,000 cubic yards coming through Butte. That equals about 20,000 haul truck trips, so not inconsequential. So it also, as an ancillary benefit, it saved the contractor some money, ICS, but it also saved the project some money. So it was truly, I don't really like using this term, but it was truly sort of a win-win situation, I think, for everybody. The contractor, the project, and the community, in that we kept those trucks off municipal streets. A little bit about our waste criteria. So we're using the waste criteria that was developed for Silverbow Creek back in the 90s, although we're applying it a little differently. And it is also very similar to the waste criteria that's in the cleanup that EPA and BPAR are implementing. It's just applied a little differently, but they're all similar criteria. And these criteria were developed for wastes that are in an active stream, like Silverbow Creek. We're a mile from the stream, but we thought they were applicable to this project. And then there's a lot of questions about how do you implement the criteria. It's not a simple thing to describe. This memo here, which was developed by our construction management firm, Wet Technologies, is like 14 pages long. So actually implementing how you identify waste and how you identify clean materials is fairly complex. Now I'm just going to show you a bunch of oblique photographs we have at the site taken from drones. So every month we fly drones up, and they go to the exact same location and orientation and take pictures of the site. So you can just get an idea about progress on it. So this is up towards Texas Avenue. You can see we excavate in cells. Any clean overburden that we find, we flop over into the cell where all the waste has been excavated. There they're laying out clean fill and lifts. So here's one from March, taken above the Civic Center, obviously looking back up on the site. You can see a couple different piles there. Way off to your left is some milled asphalt that we've just recently used in tidying up and surfacing that north parking lot area. You got some structural fill right next to it, that gray sort of rock, so that's big cobbly rock. And then over on your right-hand side of the photograph, you can see the lifts of the material that's coming from the lunchroom dump. And in the very back of the photograph, you can see that black slope. So that was all poured slag from the first phase of the project. And that's going to receive part of this ET cover. It's a waste material. It will leach if you run water through it. So we build this ET cover on top of it to eliminate any infiltration. So here's a photograph from March from that same location. So this is sort of the at-grade elevation. So if you picture this site, I think you all know, like when you drove up Civic Center Drive, you sort of went up onto the hill. So the whole site's going to be has come down about 20 feet. So it'll be a steady grade from the Civic Center back to the back of the site of about 3%, but it will be all lower. Oop. Right there. Here's just a photograph of one of the cells to give you an idea of scale. Lifts going in, so we have compaction. You know, we have and I think I have a figure of this. Our agreement with Butte-Silver, Butte-Silver is the owner of the property. We have an end land use conditions that lays out how we leave the site to turn it back over to Butte-Silver. And part of that is for these redevelopment parcels to make sure that we use good material for a base and that it gets compacted for any sort of development. This talks a little bit about the ET cover. So the ET cover, it stands for evapotranspiration cover, and it's about 3 feet thick. Well, it is 3 feet thick. And what it does, it absorbs all the moisture over a season. So your snow melt, any rain, all the precipitation you get in Butte, it stores it in the cover, and then over the summer season, it's evaporated out by plants or transpired by the soils. So it's like a big sponge. And what that does is eliminates that water, historically would just infiltrate through the wastes and then report to groundwater. So that was contaminating groundwater. The reason why we couldn't do that in the red hatched area is because those wastes were just sitting in groundwater. So groundwater was just flowing through them. So putting a cap over it wouldn't eliminate that pathway. So that's sort of the difference between these two areas. And they're about equally split, 18 acres apiece. We'll skip that. This is, I think you guys know this area or know what it looked like before. I didn't have a before picture from this angle. But again, this is all areas that are getting this evapotranspiration cap. So we smoothed it out. This area had some poured slag, had tailings in it, had a sort of bunch of mixed waste, along with what we call the sliver, which is between the elevated railroad tracks and the road there. This is right in the foreground. Here's our haul road up onto Montana Resources, adjacent to the BN line, which we cross. And then over at the top of the figure is where we've constructed the ET cover here, and then next spring we'll start revegetating that. And so one of the many advantages of this cover, these covers cost more up front, but what they provide you is a much more robust vegetative cap that can be utilized for like non-destructive, sort of activities, dog parks or fall parks or hiking or whatever. I mean, you couldn't We wouldn't want to put like a motocross course on it, but it could be used for all sorts of other things. And we thought it was wise to spend a little more money up front and reduce any costs for operation and maintenance long term. So I think this is the first ET cover that's been built in Butte. We've built some other places. We built one in East Helena at the smelter there, and there are some municipal waste landfills that use these. So that material, it's very specific material because you don't want too much clay. You want it to absorb the water, but you want it to release the water. And so it took us a couple years to find that specific material. We get it out of the rocker exit out on the Ullin place, and we bring it in from there. There's nothing like that type of material in the Boulder Batholith in the Butte Valley. This is the figure I was telling you about for the end land conditions, our agreement with Butte-Silver, how we fence it, where parking lots are. We replace any of this asphalt that we're digging up, we're replacing that asphalt, and then the rest of the extended parking lots we're blue topping. So it's all prepped for paving. We have some fenced areas in those, and they will be revegetated, but just revegetated until they're utilized for whatever the end land use will be. And then we have the ET cover areas, and then a couple greenway strips that are also permanently vegetated. So our schedule, we hope to be done with the waste removal before the end of the calendar year, weather dependent. We finished the north parking lot expansion, so if you can go out there today, you'll see that, the TV show folks all have all their trailers and stuff up there, so we made that transition, which was a little challenging, but went well. We expect to have the south parking lot all done with the removals in late 2022, but obviously we won't be able to asphalt it until next spring. We're working on the ET cover system. And then the last big piece of the project is we have to reconstruct Civic Center Road. So that includes all the utilities. So there's stormwater, there's a water line, there's some sewer lines that we're dealing with, as well as the electrical utilities, because we're putting back in a modern road, right? So we're just not replacing what was there, we're putting up to the modern standards. So there's sidewalks on both sides, curb gutters, and lights. So that will finish next year. Our budget was $37 million. Like I said, the Butte-Silver shop relocation was $14.5 million. So all the components I'm talking about here were estimated to be $22.5 million. Now, right now we think we're going to be under budget by $5 to $7 million. And what we did, so that means the digging part of the project cost us between $15.5 and $17.5 million. We've moved 1.8 million cubic yards of material, 800,000 of groundwater saturated waste. We built an ET cover system for that. We've pumped over 10 million gallons of highly contaminated water, the acidic, high concentration water. It's blue-green water. And we're rebuilding this major road, parking areas, and all the associated utilities. So one of the questions we get a lot is, okay, so you saved money on this, where does that savings go? Obviously, right? So I'm not going to go through this whole figure. I spend an hour on it, and you guys would probably all still be confused with my explanations, but those blue boxes are where the money, the state's restoration money, came from that funded the Parrot. And so the percentages those blue boxes funded the Parrot with, any remainders go back to those blue boxes in the same percentages. And as you can see, this is like the Butte Area 1 Restoration Plan, or our Butte-Silver groundwater restoration plan, or the Upper Clark Fork Basin. So a lot of that money is just coming back to Butte, and of course, then it'll be used for other restoration projects within town, right? So it doesn't disappear. We just get to use it for other priorities and other projects within the community. Now, there's also some other funding sources. As part of the consent decree settlement for BPSOU, we get all the leftover money from the $20.5 million that BP gave the state that's left over after Blacktail Creek's cleaned up. So DEQ's in charge of cleaning up Blacktail Creek, and EPA's ROD amendment. So when they finalized the agreement, they estimated the cost of the Blacktail Creek project at $5 million. So we expect substantial leftovers from that project. And again, the intention was that that would backfill for these costs of the Parrot project. So that's what the groundwater looks like, and that's not colorized or that. When we opened up the groundwater, it's blue. I've got 100 pictures of it. It's blue-green everywhere. It's hypersaturated. So this water is much more contaminated in many respects than say, the Berkeley pit water. Just because of the chemistry, I'm not going to explain it, but groundwater can just hold more contaminants in solution than an atmospheric water like the pit can. So, I know that was a lot and fast.
Thank you, Jim, for that. Commissioner Sorge, and begin our questioning.
Thank you,
Answering.
Madam Chairman. I actually got a couple different questions. Okay, one of the biggest concerns, and that's the district that I serve in that neighborhood. One of the big questions is, what are you going to do for dust control to keep the dust down when you're moving the
Yeah.
District Board?
Yeah, that's a very good question. Yeah, working a project like this and of this scale, right in the middle of a community, had real challenges, and dust was a real concern of ours. What we've been utilizing, and I think it's a combination of what we've been doing, and then I think we had just decent conditions for a couple construction seasons. We have things that are basically snow makers, like you see at a ski hill. They shoot out a mist, and so we shoot that over our active construction area. We also have 2 watering trucks, so when it's dry, we constantly water, because we know that West Side neighborhood has had issues, concerns with the mine and concerns with our project. So I think we were trying to stay hyper vigilant. I will say that there was a real advantage to having a local engineering firm for your construction management, because what's right here knows all the people know who to call if there was an issue. As well as this second phase, we have a local contractor in ICS. And I think Dale really understood what some of the concerns were. So I think that's helped us out in this second phase even more so.
Thank you.
Sure.
Follow-up, Commissioner Sorge?
I got one more follow-up, okay. What are your operation times? What are the operational hours going to be? You're going to be hauling trucks back and forth?
Well, our agreement with MR has from 7 to 7, a 12-hour window. They've had some operational issues up on the site, so we've been hauling less, because when we haul to that I don't know if I better get all the way back there. When we're hauling waste all the way to the final repository, the placement location, we're utilizing their haul road. And we can't be, even with our trucks at our 70-ton trucks, I mean, they're running 300-ton trucks. And we can't safely be on the road when they're operating on the road. So when they need the road, they let us know, and we stop hauling on it. But our agreement is 12 hours a day, 7 to 7, and then, of course, that seasonally varies. These shorter days, we don't get out there that much. But again, we've only got 30,000 left, and we're hopeful, if weather permitting and stuff, we might be done with the hauling, the first week or second week in December.
Okay, great. Thank you, Mr. Ford.
Sure.
Any other questions, council members? Commissioner Callahan?
Thanks, Madam Chair. Thanks, Jim, for coming tonight. I appreciate it. I would have liked to saw your presentation at CTEC meeting Thursday night, but I couldn't make it, so I appreciate you coming tonight. I got a couple questions here. The first question is, on the north side, where you put the drain field in, what's the projected time on pumping that? Are we still pumping it?
Yeah, it's a good question. I don't have good figures for that. So yeah, we put in a drain. Basically, it's sort of like the sub-drain, but it's more drains, because we knew we had this gap between the first phase and the second phase. There was going to be a couple of years where there was no activity on the site. but we didn't want to let that blue-green water just flow downhill, right? And since we had an open hole, we thought it was a good, low-cost alternative to dig trenches, put in pipe and rock and geotextile, and collect that water for those couple of years. So we're still running that, and we've been in discussions with BP about making something that's a more robust groundwater collection system that we can run into the future. You know, groundwater doesn't clean up right away, so just removing this waste is not going to clean up groundwater within, you know, months or years. It'll be a few years before we see real substantial changes. And we think in that interim, we should be pumping that water, because that is the water that's clogging the subdrain, that's flowing towards the creeks that we're concerned with. And we think because we can take it up to MR, and that would need a change with our agreement with MR, because that expires. But if MR would be willing to take that water, it's really a low-cost solution to a lot of problems. So we've been working with BP on how to integrate that drain field or install some wells to capture the water, and then bury our discharge line so it can run year-round. Right now, it doesn't run necessarily in the winter. If we turn it off, it will freeze. I mean, it's a double-line pipe, but it's just laying on the surface. So we're investigating trying to get a better coordinated solution with BP. With that said, I'll say that contaminated groundwater is not the responsibility of the state. That's BP's responsibility. It's not our legal responsibility, but we think there's a lot of good opportunities here to coordinate a solution for the community.
Follow-up, Commissioner
Okay,
Callahan.
thank you, Madam Chair. Second question is, I've had an opportunity to visit that site about 4 times, you know, through the construction. I didn't notice, and it could have been in between visits, I didn't notice that you put a drain field in on the south side. Did you just put one on the south side?
No, well, there's one major drain on the south side that we've been extending. It's extended all the way down, and that, but it's just one drain. We really think the longer-term solution will probably be wells, vertical wells, because you can control groundwater elevations with wells. One of our criticisms of the subdrain is that once it's installed, that's as deep as you can draw down water. It's a real limitation. So we think we could do it with wells up there. We've estimated, we've done some preliminary design. It looks like maybe 4 wells. We could capture all the water and keep it from leaving the site and flowing downhill. And I think we can do it cost effectively. You know, right now we're pumping water. There was concerns about the acidity of the water and its effects on pumps and the concentrations we have, but we've been running the same pump now for a number of years. And we've had to do maintenance on it, but it's a stainless steel, it's a special pump. It's not like something you just get down at the pump shop, but we think there's a real opportunity here for a fairly low cost.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Reardon, then Commissioner Anderson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks for coming, Jim. I've noticed, since I've been involved in this and all that, the word maintenance comes up a lot. And I know that maintenance costs money. Is there going to be any money, and how much maintenance has to be done at the completion of this project? Because really, when you're looking at dealing with this groundwater and things like that, it is a timely matter. It doesn't happen overnight.
Sure.
Maybe it does. So I just, if you have any idea of how long, or basically if there's going to be money left in the budget with the extra money that you have now, will there be any money appropriated for the maintenance for that period of time?
Yeah,
Mr.
I
Ford?
think, so there's sort of a couple pieces to that. The way we left things on our agreement with Butte-Silver is when we got closer to the end and we knew what sort of operation and maintenance that ET cover would have, we'd develop a plan, and then we would reimburse the city county to implement that plan. So yeah, it would be restoration money planned for that. With that said, these ET covers, like I said before, you spend quite a bit more up front. You spend about 50% more up front. But one of the benefits on the back end is they really need a lot less operation and maintenance than, say, a breeze cap or other types of caps. So we sort of spent money up front to try to reduce in the back, but whatever the costs are in the back, that'll be restoration money paying for it. Now, as far as pumping the water, our expectations are that's BP's legal responsibility and liability, and we will work with them, but in the end, they're gonna take over those responsibilities. You know, unless we got direction from the trustee, who's the governor, I mean, he decides ultimately how these monies are spent. But the direction we've gotten so far is to work with BP to develop a system that they will, you know, maintain and operate.
Commissioner Anderson?
Thank you very much, Chairman Shaw. Thank you very much for being here today and for your presentation. And thank you, Mr. Reardon. I had that same question, so I can scratch that out of my mind. The one that I do have, I did the maintenance on the pumps, but the other one I had, when you're pumping all of this water out, because we've been doing that for a while now, and it sounds like we'll be doing it quite a bit into the future, have you noted, or has there been any changes in the pH as this project has been going on? With the more water that comes in, is it diluting the acidity of the water that we're seeing at all? And as we move on to the project, as we continue to move that water into a place where it can be treated a lot better, do we expect that at some point in the future we'll be turning off some of these wells that you're planning on, or is this something that we may have to do in perpetuity?
No, we don't expect, I mean, we expect that the removal of the waste out of groundwater and capping those wastes that are unsaturated, that eventually that these concentrations are all going to go down, pH will come back up. So far, and I got some good graphs of this, so we've discussed it and thought about it and looked at it. It's sort of interesting. It's not intuitive. When we see our lowest concentrations is when we don't pump, and you have like snow melt in the spring. So you get all that water coming in, and that dilutes the concentrations. So the longer we pump, actually, the higher the concentrations get, and the lower the pH goes, because you're getting more pure groundwater. We do have a very robust monitoring system in place. So we monitor over 100 monitoring wells and surface waters, the subdrain, and we have them in basically like a fence pattern all the way down the valley, starting right at the edge of the excavation. So we do that quarterly, and we know like how the concentrations are changing, you know, what sort of impacts. We do have, the state has, under the consent decree with, for BPSOU, we do have some liabilities that BP could come back at us if we, say, hurt the subdrain. That was their concern. So we monitor that very diligently. But when I talk about like pumping and treating this water, you know, we're talking in the frame of years or less than a decade. We're not talking like something that would have to go on forever. Because if we had to do that, then we probably would have just left all the waste in place and just controlled the water. But we think this, removing this waste is really, I mean, we thought maybe we'd see a quicker impact than we have originally. But I've worked on a lot of these groundwater sites, and it's not unusual things not work out as you anticipated.
Yep. Any other questions? All right. Thank you, Jim. It was very informative. Just one thing, I don't know, maybe I missed this in the beginning, but how's your timeline? I mean, from what I remember when you first started and had the blue bones and everything else going on there. The 2023 objective, is that pretty much on your?
Yeah,
on
we're under
target?
contract for it. So we expect to be done in June of 2023. Most of our agreements, so we have an agreement with Butte-Silver, we have an agreement with Burlington Northern for crossing the tracks, and we have our agreement with Montana Resources, and those mostly expire in October. But we're under contract. We have a schedule. The contractor's making progress. We don't see any problems or delays. Now, we are digging, so, you know, something could happen tomorrow and we run into who knows what. I mean,
We should have the road back in.
yeah, but
Okay, great.
everything else, I think, is once we get the digging completed, everything else is completely within our control, you know, to reconstruct the road, and so I don't see any problems, you know, making the schedule.
Good news. Thank you. All right. Thanks again. All right, moving on to our section 2. Excuse me, section 2, communication number 2022-525. This is communication, J.P. Gallagher, Chief Executive, requesting Council of Commissioners for time on the October 26, 2022 Butte-Silver Committee of the Whole agenda for Tim Leahy, United States Forest Service, to give a presentation on an update for the fuel reduction program in the Beaverhead Deer Lodge National Forest. We understand that this has been postponed, but I was going to ask Chief Executive Gallagher to give us a little update. Thank you. Chief Executive.
Thank you, Chairman Shaw. This was put on the agenda for the Forest Service to come in and kind of give a report of the condition in the Beaverhead National Forest and in and around Basin Creek Reservoir. We are looking to, at one point, do an emergency condition, a resolution with an emergency condition around the Basin Creek Reservoir. And this report from the people from the Forest Service to come in and kind of talk about some of that stuff and what this would mean for us. And it actually kind of helps our timeline of remedying the conditions around the Basin Creek Reservoir. So they were not able to get their team together to come and present today. So we will wait for them to do that before we put in the resolution to move forward to the council.
Okay, thank you. So we will just hold this in advance, awaiting a new date for the future here. So moving on to section 2, communications. This is item 1 is communication number 2022-494. Robert Farron, 3501 Hancock Avenue, Butte, requesting Council of Commissioners authorization to purchase a parcel of land owned by Butte-Silver. The property is on the west boundary of 2935 Richardson Street, Butte, Montana. I plan to put an entry-level priced single-family dwelling on the property. I did talk to Patsy Coates today, and this is being held in land sales for some more details and getting information on how exactly to go forward on this request. So we will hold this in advance until that time they come back with something for us. Item 2 is communication number 2022-502. Ann Shea, Deputy County Attorney, requesting Council of Commissioners authorization to have the Chief Executive Gallagher accept a grant funding for the Residential Substance Abuse Treatment Program, RSAT, in our local detention facility, and to schedule a public hearing for October 19th, 2022 regarding the unanticipated revenue. We did approve accepting the grant funding on October 5th, and just last week we had the public hearing. So Commissioner Frederickson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move to place communication number 2022-502 on file.
We have a motion and a second to place communication 2022-502 on file. Is there anything on the question? Would everyone please vote? And would the clerk please record the vote?
11 yea, 0 nay.
11 yea, 0 nay, motion passes. Moving on to item 3. I think that's where I'm at, yeah. Item 3, communication 2022-510. Jim Ford, Parrot Tailings Waste Removal Project Manager, requesting Council of Commissioners for time on the October 26, 2022 Butte-Silver Committee of the Whole agenda for a presentation on the Parrot Tailings Waste Removal Project. And we just had that. So Commissioner Frederickson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move to place communication number 2022-510 on file.
We have a motion and a second to place communication 2022-510 on file. Is there anything on the question? Would everyone please vote? Would anyone care to change their vote? Would the clerk please record the vote?
11 yea, 0 nay.
11 yea, 0 nay, motion passes. Item 4, communication number 2022-513, Karen Malachny, Butte-Silver Health Officer, requesting Council of Commissioners concurrence to hold a public hearing for November 2nd, 2022 for the purpose of amending the fiscal year 22-23 budget to allow for increased expenditures of unanticipated revenue resulting from a Montana Healthcare Foundation grant. We will hold that in advance until the November 2nd meeting. The public hearing, we'll hold that. Item 5 is communication number 2022-525. J.P. Gallagher, Chief Executive, requesting Council of Commissioners for time on the October 26, 2022 Butte-Silver Committee, the whole agenda, for Tim Leahy, United States Forest Service, to give a presentation on an update for the fuel reduction program in the Beaverhead Deer Lodge National Forest. We will hold that in advance, anticipating a new date for that presentation. So, we have moved on down to our agenda to public comment on any public matter not on tonight's agenda. Is there anyone in the audience that would care to make a comment? I don't see anybody jumping up. So, anything else to come before us this evening? All right, very good. I would entertain a motion to adjourn. Motion to adjourn. We have a motion and a second to adjourn. All in favor? Aye. Thank you, everyone.